Welcome to the channel, folks. This is your fourth stimulus check information. So let's go over the most important news first. I don't want to waste any more of your time. Now here's what President Biden and some of the Democrats are saying about a fourth stimulus check. By the way, I want to see President Biden send out the fourth stimulus check before the end of the year. I believe that he must keep his promise to the American people and help Americans out with more stimulus checks. If you guys agree that a fourth stimulus check must be sent out, then let's get this video to 1,000 likes.
Right around the corner that's going to help you. That still hasn't passed yet. And I also think it's important to look at the whole COVID situation, too, that's been dragging down the president. You know, this summer and fall was supposed to be the time where everyone was going to be traveling. Right. Everyone was excited. And, of course, we're a more normal place than we were a year ago.
At 70 years of age, banging nails. I don't think so. I don't think the nurses in this country are going to be lifting patients at 70 years of age. That's not what we're going to allow to happen. Now, I'll tell you why. Some of our Republican friends really hate Social Security. Do you know why they hate Social Security? Because it is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is working. Before Social Security, 50% of seniors in this country lived in poverty. Before Social Security, when people had problems with disabilities, they were out there on their own. Before Social Security, if a wife lost her husband, Tom Harkin talked about that, had a bunch of kids, she was out on her own begging to survive. Social Security has worked. Today, instead of 50% of the elderly being poor, the number is too high, but it's down to 10%. And we're doing all of that at a very modest administrative cost. As the majority leader has said, and I want you all to think about it, because one of the problems that we have is that people take Social Security for granted. Think about it. That's what the majority leader just said. For 75 years, in good times and in bad times, when the folks on Wall Street a few years ago destroyed our economy, all right? When millions of people lost their lifetime savings, Social Security was there paying out every nickel owed to every eligible American. Let's not forget that. Now, there are some people who say, you know, we have a serious deficit problem. We do. $1.6 trillion deficit, $14 trillion debt. And these people then conflate. They say, well, we have this huge deficit problem. We got to cut Social Security. And as the majority leader said, anybody who tells you that Social Security has contributed one nickel to our deficit or national debt is simply not telling you the truth.
Folks, the new debt ceiling deal could negatively affect your Social Security payment. So in this video, we will be discussing the latest news surrounding the fourth stimulus check from Congress, as well as when the payments might be sent out. So be sure to stay until the end of this video, folks. So lawmakers in Washington have agreed to a short-term increase of the debt ceiling, postponing the need for the U.S. Treasury to decide who gets paid. But that agreement only gives a matter of weeks breathing space. If a longer-term solution is not achieved before December 3rd, the estimated date the U.S. Treasury will not be able to meet all of its financial obligations. Now, folks, this is bad news because it could hold back our stimulus checks from being sent out. So with the agreement passed between Republicans and Democrats in the Senate to raise debt ceiling by $480 billion, that will give the Treasury some breathing room until around December 3rd. However, due to the unpredictability of the cash flow of the Treasury takes in, a longer-term solution will need to be reached before then. Operations of the federal government were also given a short-term extension, averting a government shutdown at the end of September through a stopgap bill. Lawmakers agreed to keep the U.S. federal government funded until December 3rd, making that date an even more critical deadline. Now, should the Treasury no longer be able to meet all the financial obligations of the country, choices will have to be made about whether bills get paid or which ones are rolled over. Now, this is unmapped territory for the Department of Treasury, but beyond pulling a rabbit out of the hat, the department can proceed in a couple of ways. The Treasury could either prioritize payments or make a full day's worth of payments once there are sufficient funds. The former would mean some obligations get paid on time, while others would be delayed. The latter would result in all payments, except for interest payments being delayed. There is uncertainty about how Social Security benefits would be affected in either of the before-mentioned scenarios, as payments are financed from a dedicated payroll tax. The Social Security Administration also has its own trust funds, which would give it more wiggle room. However, the money that the agency receives through taxes doesn't cover the amount it needs to pay out benefits to around 65 million beneficiaries. Even though the agency staggers payments on a weekly basis, it still needs time to send out the checks. So if Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling the day when the U.S. Treasury will no longer be able to meet the obligations of the country on December 3rd, then the SSA may have to start delaying some payments. According to the agency's payment schedule, supplemental security income payments go out on the first Wednesday of each month, which this year is December 1st, 2 days before potential default. So demands for answers about stimulus checks have flooded IRS call centers, frustrating countless Americans who can't get through. The IRS has faced a dire staffing issue since the onset of the crisis, forcing the closure of many help centers. Meanwhile, calls for assistance came across fourfold as Americans saw information about stimulus checks and tax relief. Over the most recent tax filing season, only 3% of the 85 million calls to the IRS line reach a telephone assister. The IRS call overload has worsened in recent weeks, as the October 15 tax extension deadline looms with many Americans seeking last-minute advice. It may take a while for the IRS to get caught up on tax returns, so many Americans may have to keep waiting for their tax return checks. For their tax refund. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I truly appreciate everybody's amazing support. Now, if you have any more questions about the fourth stimulus check, then leave them in the comments below.
Just look at the radical climate policies Democrats have packed into the spree to satisfy their far-left base. The apples haven't fallen far from the awful Green New Deal. In the name of clean energy performance, Democrats want to force electric utilities to model their grids off of the high-cost, blackout-prone system that liberals have set up in the state of California. Move all 50 state electric grids toward California's. As one group of major power providers observed, not only would this be logistically unworkable, it would also threaten to send consumers' electricity costs totally out of control. And in the words of a member of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission who testified